Hey guys, it's me, Christopher, back again with yet another Lyoko book reading video. If you like this kind of format, let me know in the comments and like it if you like it. Now let's get right out into chapter 3 and 4, where in the last video, Jeremy was asking Suzanne Hertz about the whole Frank Hopper case, Odd getting himself into trouble with Kiwi, and our mystery man trying to find the hero's stronghold. Now let's get right into it.
Three Kiwi injured Yumi's home was in a quiet neighborhood, 10 minutes from Kadak by foot. It was an elegant little villa, with a well-kept but small garden that Ulrich felt had a slight Japanese touch to it. But right now the boy had no time to consider the plans. He rang the doorbell while trying to hide Kiwi in his jacket, and hoped with all his heart that Yumi's parents were not at home. "Oh, it's you," his friend said, quickly answering. "How exciting," Ulrich commented ironically. "Well, I'm glad to see you in any case. Can I come in? Is anyone else around?" "No, just Hiraki and me," she replied as she let him in. Ulrich slipped his shoes off before setting foot on the parquet flooring inside the house. Yumi's parents had lived in France for many years, but they maintained the traditions of their native land. Shoes were not allowed to be worn inside the house, for guests and hosts alike. He wiggled his toes inside their socks. He hoped that they did not stink after the run he had just made. The interior of the house was furnished in an oriental style, as well as chairs and a table of conventional height. There was also a lower table around which cushions were arranged on which to kneel. And in the bedrooms there were no beds, but instead futons, thin Japanese mattresses laid directly onto the wooden floor, or tatami. In the living room, Hiraki, Yumi's 10-year-old brother, was sitting atop a mountain of cushions, engrossed with a video game. The television's volume was turned up to infernal levels and it sounded as if an entire army of hideous monsters were marching on the house. "Would you do me a favor and turn that down?" Yumi yelled to make herself heard over the chaos. Then she directed her attention to Ulrich. "So, what are you doing here?" Kiwi decided this was the ideal moment to declare himself to the world. Leaping out of Ulrich's jacket, he ran into Hiraki's arms, but not before his paws had soiled the entire expanse of the Ishiyama's tasteful living room floor. Ulrich looked down at his clothes. His t-shirt and the inside of his jacket were torn and soaked with mud. "Oh, great, what is he doing here?" Yumi demanded. Ulrich sighed. "When I left the gymnasium I saw Jim dragging Odd off, and Odd had Kiwi in his arms. The little runt got himself caught. So I followed them. Jim left the dog in our bedroom and then accompanied Odd to the principal. I managed to get Kiwi out just in time, and a good thing too, as Odd would have been suspended otherwise." Yumi's fists were clenched to her sides. "You've still not answered me. What's he doing here? I didn't know where else to go. You're the only one of our group who doesn't live in the dormitories, so, since we can't keep him, at least for a while, I was going to ask if you could take care of Kiwi, say, for a few days. Just until things calm down." Yumi's voice was as cold as ice on his ears. "You have gone mad, right? It's out of the question. What would my mom and dad say?" Ulrich felt a wave of irritation rising up his back. "Well, it's not like you ever considered what they had to say important before. And what matters now is helping Odd. Really, you want to talk to me about parents? Just give me the pleasure. And in any case, the answer is no." "Hey. Calm down, you two," little Hiraki intervened. "I'll take care of Kiwi. He's my friend." The dog confirmed this by licking his face. "I already said that we're not going to discuss this," Yumi rebuked him. Ulrich ignored her, stooping down to Hiraki's level. "Thanks for this, kid. Odd will be grateful to you forever." Then he addressed them both. "Okay, so that's settled. Now excuse me, but I've got to dash." Quickly he turned his back to them and left, stopping only to pull his shoes back onto his feet as he hopped down the garden path. His parents. Yumi just had to bring up that particular subject. Ulrich did not get along well with them most of the time, particularly his father, an old-fashioned, overly severe type of man. Certainly it would be wonderful if things could be resolved between them, to return to the old days, when they were still a united family and there was not a constant sense of tension at home. But now that possibility seemed like a mirage. He started running towards Kadak as fast as possible, trying not to think. Because he had no desire to think. He had no desire to think about anything. A photo of Ulrich. He was smiling, his eyes squeezed shut because of the bright sunlight falling on his face. The photo was stuck to the page of a diary, and was framed with little drawings of flowers. Yumi sighed and spread herself out across her bed. The door was locked. She did not want Hiraki to know she kept a diary. Or that she made drawings of flowers. He would never let her forget it if he did. She turned the page. Here was a sketch of how Ulrich appeared on Lyoko, in the uniform of a samurai, a white headband holding back his hair, wearing an elegant kimono and carrying a katana, a long warrior's sword, at his side. The first time she had materialized onto the virtual world, Yumi had discovered that the both of them were dressed in classical Japanese costumes. She, in fact, had assumed the form of a geisha, wearing extremely traditional makeup and a kimono, secured at the back with a thick sash or obi. She went back to the first pages of the diary, where there were a few scribbled notes, the story of their first meeting. I was in the gym, practicing martial arts, and I sparred with this boy, Ulrich. He moves well and with incredible agility. In a few years he might become a master in the discipline. But in the end I beat him. And it was beautiful. Yumi sighed again. Why did these things have to be so difficult? Further ahead in the diary problems began to appear. And these problems bore the name of William Dunbar. William was the same age as Yumi, and had fallen in love with her at first sight, even if she. The girl pulled her MP3 player out from under a pillow and inserted the earphones. She selected a playlist of slow songs and, with the diary on her stomach, lay down with her eyes closed, letting the music carry her thoughts far away. Images of herself, of Ulrich, of William in a swimsuit. Ulrich saving her life during one of their innumerable battles on Lyoko. William with a cruel expression on his face, the time when his mind had been possessed by Xana and the boy had tried to kill her. Pem. Yumi jumped to her feet, screaming in fear. Hey, are you alright Yumi? Came Hiraki's voice moments later, from the other side of the door. Why yeah. It's okay, She looked down at the floor. The MP3 player had exploded, becoming a dark mound of molten goop. It stank of burnt plastic and was smoking. You what? Her insistent brother asked, beating on the wooden surface of the closed door. I tripped Hiraki, that's all. Calm down, she tried to reassure him. But I heard a bang. It was an explosion, I'm sure of it. I'm telling you, everything's fine. Go away. The earphones had exploded out of her ears. The MP3 player was ruined forever. It almost seemed like one of the old electrical attacks used by. Yumi shook her head. No, that was impossible. It had to be a coincidence. Odd regarded himself in a mirror as he made various poses and expressions, then he smeared a little gel over the palms of his hands and applied them to his hair, modeling it into his usual style. For a beautiful moment he continued to examine himself with a critical eye. He had put on a desperate t-shirt, his favorite rock band, and a pair of jeans that had fallen victim to his paintbrush. Oh you heartbreaker, he said in satisfaction to his reflection, and tried his most dazzling smile. Nothing could go wrong, he was irresistible. He had already wiped the incident with Kiwi from his mind. Ulrich had saved him in the nick of time and now he had a free evening to spend courting Eva Skinner. Elida had told him that the girl would be taking supper with them in the Kadak cafeteria, so he knew she was somewhere on the campus. Odd cautiously stuck his head out from the bathroom door and checked the corridor in both directions. The dormitory was deserted. Perfect. He slipped away outside, his ears straining to hear the faintest hint of Jim's pounding footsteps. Passing the entrance doors he sped across the courtyard at breakneck speed. There were no teachers patrolling the grounds, it was too cold and the snow was icing over. In all probability he would have better luck searching for Eva somewhere warm, maybe in the cafeterias. With a bit of luck he would find her alone. Poor little thing, fervently wishing to have someone to speak to. Perhaps, to himself. In short, he would be waiting for her. Who's there? Odd's luck was not with him. It was Sissy, also too elegantly dressed to be out for an innocent walk. She was wearing a black sleeveless top that was tied off behind her neck along with a skimpy mini skirt. Her skin was bluish from the cold. What a strange smell, observed Odd, sniffing the surrounding air. It's like vegetables. Smell. Vegetables. It's my perfume, stupid. I was looking for Ulrich. And who are you dressed up for? Eva Odd answered, without thinking. Then, in a hurry, he added, I need to ask her for the notes, the lesson. Sissy smiled maliciously. Yes, yes, my foot. Someone wants to be friends with the beautiful American girl. Footsteps on the path. Boisterous laughter. Jim Morales? Out of instinct, Todd seized Sissy by the arm and dragged her behind a bush. Hey. What are you doing? Leave me alone, she shrilled. SSSSSH, he hissed back, a finger pressed up to his mouth. They were close together, in a tight space, surrounded by the frost-covered leaves. Sissy was just a few centimeters from him and could not help blushing. What do you want to do, Odd? She whispered. The footsteps passed and he jumped back. What's going through your head? I didn't want to do anything. He dusted the snow off his clothes. Now he had to come up with a plausible excuse. Of course he could not tell the daughter of the principal that he had just escaped from the dormitories. Someone was coming and I didn't want them to see us together, he improvised quickly. Yes, a plausible excuse had just come to mind. Odd smiled and added, what else? I have a reputation to defend. Of course I couldn't let myself be seen with you all spruced up in the snow like this. And wearing such awful perfume as well. There must have been some flaw in his otherwise perfect excuse, because Sissy became even redder, but with rage. Adela Rabia, I swear that I'll make you suffer for this, she screamed, running away. Odd felt a pang of regret. Sissy was a silly goose, but perhaps this time he had gone too far. Later he returned to his room and silently threw himself onto the bed. Ulrich was on the opposite side of the room, also lying down with his eyes open. His feet were raised up, supported against the wall. Odd had wandered the school without picking up a trace of Eva, and had gained nothing whilst risking a personal encounter with the principal. It had not been his day. He had slunk back to the dormitory with his tail between his legs. Oh, he mumbled. Thanks for today. With Kiwi, I mean. Ulrich answered with a grunt. Don't mention it. Hard day, eh? Odd peeped furtively at his friend. Don't talk to me about it. Do you want to talk to me about it? Odd remained in silence. Not even he wanted to speak. But seeing his friend so despondent did not please him one bit. Ulrich was a blockhead, but he meant well. To see him so sad was really unsettling. Out of impulse he grabbed one of his slippers and threw it at his roommate's head. Hey, what the heck did you do that for? Have you gone mad? You ate a. With a feline bound, Odd jumped onto his friend's bed, wielding a pillow over his head. Ulrich, however, was faster and blocked him in midair with his own pillow, before throwing a shoe back at him. The pillows exploded and the two of them burst out laughing. Woof. 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 Kiwi was on his 12th circuit of the Hiraki's bedroom Grand Prix and kept on gaining distance on his pursuers. That is, Hiraki. He curved across the tatami and leapt onto the writing desk, shot under the wardrobe, spun round the last corner while nearly grazing the door and started his next lap. And not for an instant did he stop his wild barking. Kiwi. Stop, the child yelled. Hiraki. Yumi screamed suddenly. Are you going to put a stop to this madhouse? She opened the bedroom door and Kiwi decided that the race was over and now was the time to head to the victor's podium. He slipped between Yumi's legs without stopping and scampered away. Oh, no. The little boy launched himself in pursuit of the dog, but in the heat of the moment his shoulder struck Yumi's knees, and both of them ended up on the floor. Ow. Hiraki. Kiwi's escaping, he exclaimed. But where would he go? His sister panted, somewhat annoyed. The answer was simple, the kitchen window. The two of them had finished eating some time earlier, alone since their parents were at a friend's house. Yumi had cleaned and washed their plates and then left the window open to air the house. Demonstrating surprising athletic prowess for a mutt such as himself, Kiwi jumped onto the kitchen bench, slalomed between the recently cleaned burners and disappeared over the windowsill to be swallowed up in the evening darkness. Oh, no. We've got to get him back. Hiraki exclaimed in alarm. The girl shook her head, irritated. You go after him, Hiraki. You agreed to take care of Kiwi. I'm staying here. Hiraki looked at her for an instant, his almond eyes contracted in two narrow fissures. But Yumi, please. I'm not discussing it. And I'd get moving fast if I were you. Goodness knows where Kiwi will end up otherwise. Hiraki hurled himself into motion and shuddered as he ran into the icy night air. The streetlights illuminated only a deserted road flanked by rows of letterboxes, gardens pressed up against gardens, cars parked beside the pavement. It was rather late by now and the interior lights of the houses were generally turned off. Woof. Woof. Kiwi was over there. Far along the road, on the left. Somewhere. The city, by day, was a calm and bright place. Hiraki preferred it much more than Kyoto, the Japanese city in which he had been born. But till now he had never had cause to go about the streets at night, when it was dark and cold and lonely. The roads that he crossed every day with Yumi to go to school now had a different aspect, the shadows stretching across the bitumen like long, dark fingers. Hurrying to chase after Kiwi, the boy arrived in the vicinity of the academy. Just along and to the right was the gate to a villa called the Hermitage. Silence had descended on the street, apart from the wind and the tinkling sound of empty cans as they rolled along the ground. He lost him, Hiraki thought in despair. He lost Kiwi. Suddenly, a man came out of a road that skirted around the side of the Hermitage. He was wearing a leather jacket and had his back turned. In the weak light of the street lamps, Hiraki could only barely make out his facial features. He tried not to make himself noticed. Something about that man disturbed him and was causing him to shudder. In that same instant, in the villa's garden, Kiwi began to bark, and soon howls, growls, and other barks overlaid his own. They sounded rabid and ill-tempered. Without hesitation, Hiraki scaled the Hermitage's gate and allowed himself to drop down the other side. He was small and slender, but agile like his sister. Once on the ground he looked around cautiously. Kiwi was no longer barking, but the other dogs were still growling. The little boy hurled himself in that direction, so worried that he did not notice that in fact there was no road going around that side of the Hermitage. Where then, could that man have come out from? But it was an unimportant thought, after all, the person had already gone away. And right now he had someone else on his mind. The grounds of the villa were deserted, and Hiraki fumbled in the dark for a while in search of Kiwi. Now the barking had stopped and the disturbing silence was wrapping around him like a cloak. Risking slipping, he walked on the layer of snow, approaching the garage that formed a low hut against the side of the villa and, finally, he heard something. It was the sound of breathing, rapid gasps that made him think of an animal struggling to get air into its lungs. And it was coming from a sad little bundle that had collapsed onto the ground. It was Kiwi. And he was injured. Grigory Nictopoulos hurriedly covered the distance that separated him from his pickup, climbed aboard and slammed the door with enough strength to risk breaking it. He had recognized the little boy, Hiraki Ishiyama. And the little brat had nearly seen his face. Only Grigory's training and infinite caution had saved him, but just at the last second. It had not been enough to put him on the slippery slope to ruin. He knew in advance that these kids were damnably cunning. So he had to pay even more attention. The magician was paying him to foresee the unforeseen. For a spy in the shadows there was nothing interesting on television. I'd let the remote control fall onto the duvet and yawned. If I carry on like this I risk falling asleep. And it's only midnight. On the other side of the room Ulrich raised his head from the literature textbook. You know what you could actually try doing? Studying. His friend stared at him disgustedly. A superior mind such as mine does not need to study. Odd's answer was interrupted by the trilling sound of Ulrich's phone. Hello, the boy answered. Okay, I'm coming. He ended the call and started slipping on his shoes. Odd jumped to his feet. Where are you going? You're seriously not going to leave me here on my own, are you? It was Yumi. She sounded really worried, and she asked for me to run over to her place. Worried? Why? Ulrich threw him a fleeting glance. She didn't say. Odd was now also pulling on his shoes. I'd hate it if anything happened to Kiwi. Has your superior mind forgotten, but you're being punished, confined to quarters? Ulrich cut him off. Odd weighed in his answer. Yes, that's true. But I'm only in trouble if someone sees me. I went out this afternoon and nothing happened. Odd, you're not putting so much as your nose out of this room. Far as I'm concerned, you've caused enough trouble already. Oh, but of course, Daddy dearest. As you wish. Ulrich smiled in resignation and the two friends ran out through the door. Kiwi was lying in Hiraki's lap wrapped in a blanket. He was still breathing raggedly and his heartbeat was elevated. Odd hurled himself immediately at his wounded pet. Hiraki looked at him through eyes swollen with tears. I'm sorry, Odd, I'm so sorry. Odd delicately lifted the blanket. Kiwi's squat body was covered in scratches, 2 of which had cut very deep. One of his ears had been bitten and the small dog trembled like a quivering leaf. Odd caressed him carefully, being careful not to apply pressure on his injuries. What happened? Yumi, who had opened the door and was now hopping nervously from one foot to the other, explained. Ulrich's eyes became like laser beams, his gaze cold enough to burn. Congratulations Yumi, truly. Not only did you not want to take care of Kiwi, but you also let him escape. And if that was not enough, you sent Hiraki off on his own to find him. Your little brother. At night. Wandering around the city. She tried to speak. But Ulrich was so furious that he did not give her the chance. If you had been together, perhaps you would have caught Kiwi 5 minutes before he was attacked by these dogs, and now he would not be injured, and perhaps, Yumi was not the type to silently stay put when confronted with such a string of accusations, even if she felt inside that there was some truth to them. Indeed, perhaps that was why she was now so irritated. Fine, go ahead and judge me, she replied crossly. Could you have done any better, huh? Mr. Perfect, you, shut it, the both of you. Odd was purple in the face and had yelled so loudly that Kiwi had yelped and Hiraki started in shock. Someone has hurt Kiwi badly and I still don't know what happened. Then, after taking in a great breath to calm himself down, he continued in a softer tone, Hiraki, where did you find him? At the Hermitage. Suddenly the little boy remembered the man he had glimpsed from behind. There was no road running around that side of the Hermitage, and if there was no road, that meant the man had to have been coming out from the Hermitage. Stammering, increasing troubled, Hiraki explained to them what had happened. An unknown man, commented Yumi. Perhaps he was looking for Ilida. Maybe he has something to do with Hopper. Ulrich exclaimed. We've got to go check. She nodded. I'll call Ilida, you handle Jeremy. We've all got to get to the Hermitage, maybe we can get to the bottom of this story. 10 minutes prior, Jeremy had been sleeping peacefully in his room at Kadak, watched over by the poster of Einstein that hung on the wall. 10 minutes later, with a heavy jacket pulled over his pajamas and his round glasses worn crookedly on the end of his nose, he was bent face down in the gar den of the Hermitage, a handheld torch illuminating the layer of snow that covered the ground. Around him, like fireflies, shone the torches of his friends. Hiraki alone had remained at the Ishiyama residence, looking after poor Kiwi. Here! Jeremy exclaimed suddenly. Come and see. The frozen snow was not the best medium for showing up trace details, but at one point close to the garage, the thick blanket had been torn away and the mud underneath was plowed with a tangle of paw prints. Dogs. My gosh, it was big, commented Odd as he laid his hand onto one of the nearest prints. Look, the claws have dug right into the earth. It must have been a real animal, it's a miracle that Kiwi's still alive. Jeremy examined the ground with scrupulous attention. The tracks are confused, but if I'm correct there were at least 2 dogs, both of the same breed, though one was a little lighter. See how this print is less marked. Stray dogs. Ulrich ventured. Jeremy shook his head, little convinced. Do you see here, against the garage wall? He indicated to a crescent under the wall, where the mildew had been scraped away. Shoes did that. And I'm willing to bet that whoever responsible was here with the dogs. Just like Hiraki said. Dogs, whispered Ilida. Like the ones I heard barking last night, just like in my dream. Jeremy, I'm scared. Jeremy felt an impulse to strongly embrace her in his arms, but he held his ground. Don't worry Ilida. We'll solve this mystery, you'll see. And we'll be here to protect you. Odd slipped through the illuminated corridors of the dormitories. Ulrich had already returned to Kadak some time ago, to avoid having to speak with Yumi. While he had insisted on accompanying the girl back to her house, he had wanted to check in on Kiwi. Hiraki had dutifully disinfected and bandaged the invalid as best he could. Now that they were cleaned, the injuries did not seem so terrible. In just a few days he would be back to being the same joyful dog as ever. Odd. Della. Rabia. The boy jumped, a shiver running down the length of his back. Trembling, he turned around. Gee, Jim. Always a pleasure, my friend. Jim Morales' muscular arms were crossed over his chest and he did not the least bit glad. Friend, my foot. Looks to me like you're breaking the terms of your punishment. Odd's mind raced ahead at full speed. I've only been out for, a moment. To go to the bathroom. Honestly. The bathrooms are in the other direction. You've been out of the school, my boy. At night. In spite of your punishment. That tip-off was right, it seems. Odd's ears straightened suddenly. Tip-off? What tip-off? Who blew the whistle on me? Jim fumbled with the collar of his polo shirt, clearing his throat. Oh well, did I say tip-off? I mean a hunch, my intuition, Jimbo Odd interrupted. Calling him Jimbo always had a certain effect, especially when the teacher had gotten himself muddled. Who told you that I had left my room? Nobody. The truth came home to Odd in a flash. Sissy Delmas, in a top and mini skirt, standing amidst the frozen bushes of the ground and yelling, I swear that I'll make you suffer. It was Sissy, wasn't it? Well. You tell me, the gymnastics teacher responded evasively. In any case, that has no effect on this. Jim suddenly retook control. You've violated the rules, first by bringing an animal to Caddick and then by leaving the dormitories at night. Therefore, by the powers vested in me by the principal, I declare you, that girl will pay for this, Odd whispered. Watch it. I declare you to be in punishment. For a full week. Now get to your room immediately or I'll make it a fortnight. Odd's only option was to obey. While Odd was returning to his room, disheartened at being placed under house arrest, in Washington, D.C., capital of the United States of America, it was more or less 9 in the evening. The office did not enjoy a view of one of the city's great monuments, like the Washington obelisk, the Capitol building or the enthroned statue of President Lincoln. It was like any other office, located inside one of so many suburban skyscrapers, all equal, anonymous gray buildings. But that did not mean that the person who occupied this office was of no importance. Quite the contrary. When the phone rang, the woman seated behind the desk answered immediately with a dry voice, yes. On the other end of the line was Maggie, her secretary. Ma'am, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there is a call for you. From France. The woman, codenamed Dido, made herself more comfortable on her revolving armchair and checked out of the corner of her eye the long row of clocks hanging over the door. One for each of the major capitals of the world. At this moment it was after 3 in the morning in France. For someone to call at this hour, implied a certain urgency. Maggie, put them through to me, she made up her mind at last, in the meantime pressing a button on the telephone that ensured the line was not being monitored. The voice that came down the length of the cable was male, deep, and embarrassed. Ma'am, Agent Lone Wolf. It's been some time. Yes ma'am, I felt you ought to know what's happened in the computer science unit. They've turned something up. The computer science unit consisted of a number of slave computers that day and night monitored all searches made on the World Wide Web, hunting for suspicious words or phrases. It was an immense job, laborious, illegal, and more often than not, useless. Go ahead. We're on a secure line. This afternoon we detected a search made on a private intranet. Someone was trying to obtain information first on Herman's Hopper, and then Waldo Schaffer, who are in fact the same person, Dido sighed. Herman's Hopper. Again. The case of Hopper was over 10 years old, but she did not need to check any dossier to refresh her memory. At the time she had been a young, promising official at the beginning of her career and the Hopper case had been her first, not to say her only, failure. Thank you for informing me, Agent, she said. The voice on the end of the telephone cleared his throat. I apologize, ma'am, but that isn't everything. The search was made on the internal network of Caddick Academy. Dido could not resist striking her fist against the surface of the desk. Herman's Hopper and Caddick together, a dangerous mix. Extremely dangerous. Very well, I see. I want a man assigned to work through Caddick's communications. Telephone calls, internal searches, internet searches. Everything. The past 2 months up till today. And I want a squad prepped to deploy, in case of emergencies. Yes ma'am. It might be something innocuous. A clerk reorganizing the archives or something of that nature. But it's better not to run the risk. Yes ma'am. Dido ended the call without saying another word and sat immobile next to the telephone. A part of her, after all, had been hoping for this case to be reopened. It was a chance to turn her single failure into a great success. The next morning, Jeremy and the others met by the coffee machine. Only Odd was missing. He had passed by 2 minutes previously, accompanied by Jim Morales, who was following him from close behind, and had just enough to direct a single despairing look at his friends. I knew they would catch him, Ulrich had observed as he watched them pass. We'd best go too, guys, lessons will be starting. Jeremy was on his feet close to Elida. They both had eyes that were black-rimmed from tiredness. I think the only solution is to put the Hermitage under observation. Do you mean organize some kind of guard duty? Yumi asked. Actually, I was thinking along the lines of closed-circuit television surveillance, Jeremy clarified. I can build the cameras here. Last night I went back to the factory and checked, just about all the components I need are there. We then place them around the house, and from the computer in my room I can monitor them all. So if by chance this man decides to return, we will have an image of them. And then we will able to report him to the police. A pleased Yumi finished for him. Right. Jeremy remained absent-minded. More or less. Elida smiled. But isn't your computer dismantled and stored in a big box? Didn't you say that you would only keep the laptop for your schoolwork? Actually, I seem to recall something like that myself. Ulrich sniggered. With Lyoko gone, I'm done with computer science. It's better this way, and you said it in such a solemn voice too. Hee hee. Jeremy blushed. But that was before. This is an emergency. I'll reassemble everything tonight. If someone is searching for secrets of the Hermitage under our noses, then it serves us best to use every piece of technology at our disposal to flush him out and gain some understanding. Jeremy was not the only student at Caddick to anxiously look forward to Professor Hertz's lessons. Susan Hertz was in fact a most beloved teacher, because she did not limit herself to the educational curriculum, instead incorporating any scientific subject, from DNA and computers to space travel, examples and experiments that always fired the imaginations of all her pupils. Every lesson was a new discovery. Except today everything seemed completely different. In fact, the professor did not even say hello to the students and instead went directly to her desk, seating herself with a frowning expression, and removed the curriculum from her folder. Let's see. Open your books to page 48. Nicholas, would you start reading? Nicholas looked perplexedly at his best friend Hervé, who was also his roommate. Together they were Sissy's two bodyguards, but Hervé was the science expert. And during lessons Professor Hertz normally focused her attentions on him and Jeremy, the two most brilliant students, allowing Nicholas to sleep in peace. Hertz cleared her throat and fixed Nicholas with an annoyed stare. Is there a problem, Nicholas? The boy roused himself. No, miss. Then he rose, opened the book and began to read aloud. By the early 1930s scientists could consider themselves to be at a good point in the comprehension of matter. Chadwick's discovery of the neutron seemed to have revealed all the mysteries that had previously surrounded the structure of the atom. Jeremy whispered to Elida, "What the devil happened?" "What do you mean?" she replied, raising an eyebrow. "Look at the professor. It's not like her, to just sit there like that. When has Hertz left a student to read the textbook and said that was enough? Hertz has never followed the curriculum, always introduces her lessons, always brought the number of known elementary particles to 4. Jeremy was not the only to feel out of step. The whole class was looking around, somewhat lost. Worried that he would have to keep reading for the entire lesson, Nicholas managed to deliver a kick under the table at Hervé, who cleared his throat and also rose to his face. Professor. Yes, Hervé. I apologize for asking this, but, are you feeling well? The woman raised her head over the book, her face expressionless. You see, Jeremy confirmed in a low voice to Elida. It's strange. I'm perfectly fine, Hervé, thank you. And Jeremy, I would be very grateful if you cease chatting with your friend. Another word and you will be sent out of the class. Jeremy sent outside of the classroom in punishment? Such an event had never occurred in the history of Caddick. Very well, Nicholas. Hertz exhorted, if you could continue please. Thank you. Nicholas held back a sigh and started to read again. After a short while a hand rose above the desks. Yes, dear. Professor Hertz asked in a strangely sweet tone. Eva Skinner rose to her feet, like a magnet drawing the attention of Odd and the greater part of the male student body. Excuse me, Professor, she began. But I don't yet understand what elementary particles actually are. But of course, dear, Professor Hertz smiled. I'll explain immediately. Jeremy was still brooding over the threat of being forced out of the classroom when Elita jabbed him with her elbow and said, "Have you noticed? She's strange too, not just hurts. Yesterday she was struggling to enunciate words and today she doesn't sound the least bit foreign. Her French is perfect." Jeremy nodded and began observing Eva, intrigued. When the lesson had ended, Professor Hertz shut herself in her office and slumped back against the door. Then she removed her glasses and rested a hand against her forehead. Teaching was always difficult. It demanded concentration and engagement with the subject material, but it was all the more challenging when one's head was obstinately set in a tizzy. It was all Jeremy's fault, and in truth she was glad to have scolded him in class, for once. He was to blame, and his speeches on supercomputers and Fermat's Hopper. It was fortunate that she had thought of placing Waldo Schaefer's dossier in the care of the principal. She knew Jeremy well enough to feel that he would have stopped at nothing to get his hands on those papers, and in so doing risk calling down genuine calamity. Delmas, however, understood the complexity of the situation and could be trusted to guard the document with discretion. Despite this, however, she did not feel at peace. Perhaps she was mistaken about everything, and that history had been marching forward for far too long. TOC. Yes. Hertz burst out, starting. "It's me," answered a female voice. It was Eva. Eva Skinner. "Ah yes, come on in dear. Do you wish to speak to me? Go right ahead." As the door opened, the professor flaunted a wide smile. The problem of Hopper would have to wait for now. Mrs. Marguerite Della Robbia arrived home carrying a precariously balanced stack of packages and carrier bags that rose above the top of her head. The day was bright and lukewarm, making her wish she could go for a walk. It was just a shame that she had to be back at work in half an hour. Laying everything on the table, she looked around perplexedly. Something was different from an hour ago, when she had rushed out to make a quick dash to the supermarket. It only took her a second to discern what was wrong. The sofa cushions had been moved. She had arranged them in their usual position the previous evening, before retiring to bed. And, before leaving the house, when she had checked for herself that the lights were out and the windows shut, the cushions had still been where she had left them, the cheerful pattern of red flowers on their covers downplaying the dark leather skin of the sofa that her husband loved so much. Her husband? Perhaps Robert had returned from work early? Then again no, he would certainly have let her know. And later in the day he had a meeting scheduled, so he would not be returning to the house until late. Nevertheless, Marguerite called aloud, "Robert, are you here? Honey." No answer came. "I'm imagining things," she murmured in a low voice, once again occupying herself with the shopping. She had just stored the frozen spinach in the freezer when the telephone began to ring. Another oddity, no one ever called the house at this hour. She ran to answer it. Perhaps it was odd, but that would have been unusual. Her son almost never called home, except for when he had gotten himself into trouble. Somewhat breathless, she reached the bedroom, picked up the telephone from the bedside table and finally answered it. "Hello." And then, "Hello." The line had not disconnected. Marguerite could hear a rustling sound though the handset. "What is this, a joke? Ha ha. Very funny." But deep down inside she did not feel so calm. She was not an easily impressionable woman, out of necessity, with as clumsy a husband as Robert and an uncontrollable son-in-law. But that quiet rustling, and the sound of withheld breathing, was beginning to unnerve her. In a flash the disturbed sofa cushions came into context. This was no joke, there was someone in the house with her. With a start she flung the telephone receiver to the floor and hurled herself into the next room. And then she saw the shadow. The shadow sprang back, jumped through the living room window and disappeared into the grass of the meadow. Mrs. Della Robbia's howls echoed off the walls of the house. In the kitchen, her shopping lay scattered across the floor. Yellow liquid dripped from 2 broken eggs onto the tiles.
So where's the return to path when you need it? Looks like things are not going to be going well for our heroes. And the teachers are starting to get more suspicious. Oz in big trouble. Kiwi injured. And it looks like our mystery man getting into the Hermitage to find more secrets. Comment below if you like this format and like the video for more. And I'll see you guys later.